In an April 2014 Miss Manners column, a frequent business traveler wrote inquiring whether he was wrong to check his blood glucose while remaining in a seat on an airplane. Miss Manners' response was an emphatic yes. She likened the monitoring of one's blood glucose to bodily functions that were best kept to the restroom. Such advice suggests the disease, which affects over 29 million Americans, is something to be ashamed of. Her response is based on a misunderstanding and intolerance of the disease. Unfortunately, such views are widespread and are indicative of a systemic problem that has some unlikely sources. For the last decade, the medical and public health communities have embarked on a public awareness campaign to combat the type 2 diabetes epidemic that plagues the globe. The public service announcements created to support this campaign are rooted in the very best intentions, to educate the public about the potential causes and dangers of type 2 diabetes. However, these efforts almost always generalize diabetes, failing to distinguish between the different types and failing to acknowledge that sometimes even the most healthy among us get diabetes. Instead of educating the public about diabetes, these PSAs have increased misunderstanding, especially of type 1 or juvenile diabetes. Worse, these ads are plagued with a rhetoric of condemnation through their messages of prevention and personal responsibility, thereby constructing an identity for the diabetic community that presents people with diabetes as undesirable and even monstrous. One such example is the televised PSA titled Diabetes Kills, sponsored by the International Diabetes Foundation. Critics took aim at this ad because it unnecessarily frightens its audience, notably children, who are likely not only to recognize the representation of the Dementors, but are also likely to hold some very negative attitudes toward them. Another ad, this one sponsored by the World Diabetes Foundation, not only presents an overly generalized view of diabetes, one that conflates type 1 and type 2, but it also presents body stature as a universal cause of diabetes. Because body stature is something individuals can control after accounting for genetics, people with diabetes, whether they're obese or not, whether they have type 1 or 2 or one of the other forms of diabetes, are often perceived in the media and by extension in society as being personally responsible for their disease. There are people all around us we wouldn't expect to have diabetes, but they do. Type 1, type 2, you can't tell by looking at them who has what. These are pretty successful people who have accomplished a lot. It's time we stopped monstering them and their disease.